Hi guys, how are you all doing? It's a beautiful opportunity to be here with you. Hope you all are good. It's 2019, and depending on the time or part of the world you are in, some people are already getting to 2020. Nigeria is going to be in 2020 in 6 hours. So I have a message for the church. How are you all doing? If you're in Nigeria, you've got about 6 hours. If you're not in Nigeria, you've got many more hours. 2019 was an eye opener, not just for you guys, but also for me. There were so many things knew but didn't realize that I saw but hadn't visualized until 2019. If there was a year that brought clarity, it was 2019. It brought clarity of purpose, clarity of direction. The Spirit of the Lord moved in 2019, and because of the prep I had done years before, I was able to understand the frequency and tap into that frequency. You know, when I speak of clarity, I can now see purpose for the free nation, for my life. It's not been an automatic journey. It's not been on cruise control. I've not been flying on autopilot. Trust me, it's had its low lows and its high highs. There were many people who started 2019 with us that didn't finish or that won't be finishing T19 with us, you know? Uh, in many ways, Tazebod's dad started 2019 with us, but at the very beginning of the year, we lost him. He didn't make it. There are many people who, as one reason or the other, are no longer with us in this realm. And there are some people who are no longer with us in the church or no longer with us in the various capacities they used to be in at the beginning of the year. And the most surprising thing is many of them are people I would least have expected. There are some people who, you always have that friend family that you always know they will spring a surprise on you. You know those family members. You just know that this one a wala person or this one you don't feel that they got your back. So you're always wary of those ones. You'd be amazed that it's sometimes the ones that you actually believe are your ride or dies that end up not being your ride or dies. And I speak with experience, especially with this movement and how far this year has come. There were people who were cool at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden things turned sour. There are people who we were extra cool, and things turned sour. It's just one thing that I learned from that message, and it is that you can never rely on man. Man is going to flip on you. Your parents are going to disappoint you. When you least expect, the government is going to fail you. When you least expect, your man of God is going to let you down. I can never forget Taze experience. Taze was attending a church when she was in Port Harcourt, and she was going through some financial issues with her bakery. And the man of God whose church she attended, the man of God who she paid tithe to, the man of God who she gave offering to, and when the man of God and his family had, he was known to her as man of God, but now we know better. There's nobody who's a man of God. We're all men of God. And out of the blues, one day, he's interested in. First time I realized that you cannot trust man. You cannot hold on to the person. Political parties will let you down. Pastors will let you down. Friends will let you down. Disciples will let you down. Hello. It wasn't a Roman soldier that came to point out Christ. It was Judas, the one who ate and drank from his cup. So many of you are expecting your enemies to come from outside, not knowing that you have enemies on the inside. I remember a little cartoon I watched when I was younger, when in the cartoon, the guy cooked this lovely cake, and this cake was smelling so good, and people from all soldiers from all over the world wanted to come and take over the cake, and this guy spent the entire day fighting off all the strongest knife to finish and go inside, and the rats in the house had eaten the cake. So while he was fighting off the enemy on the outside, the of the enemy, I because you need them. For instance, if I tell you I'm going to pay your school fees, I'm just giving you an example, and I pay you up till 400 level, and at 400 level, when you need me the most, I back down. Sometimes the support might not be financial, sometimes the support might be emotional, sometimes the support might be in one other way or form. And the lesson there is you need to be careful not to hate those people. You just need to be careful. You just need to understand the message there is do not expect that man will not disappoint. Talking about people, I was on the phone yesterday for about 5 minutes with Omoyele Showore. And I was glad to hear that he was doing quite well. He sounded bubbly and healthy on the phone. I wanted to, of course, have a conversation with him that you guys could listen to. But for me to do that or have that, I have to go through the approval of many lawyers and blah, 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 blah. So believe me, we will have that conversation going forward, and you'd be able to hear him speak and would be able to discuss. A lot of people think Omoyele Shore and I enemies, or we're quarreling, or I don't believe in him or supporting him. We have our differences, and we spoke of our differences yesterday. And of course, we share mutual respect, and he's somebody I absolutely respect. And if there ever was a voting process that presented itself again, he would still be my number one candidate. And I'm hoping that would happen going forward. There were many people who came into my life, just of course, as a lot of people left, and I smaller circle do is close relation. A free nation does not condone indiscriminate sex. I need to, if there was a bell I could ring so this could register in your subconsciouses or some subconsciouses more than ever before, I will ring that bell. Be aware, however, that I do not see anything wrong in a man and a woman who are getting ready to marry, who have been betrothed, families have met, dates have been picked, even if the dates are 3 years from now, for whatever reason, I do not see why they cannot engage in intimacy. There's no such thing as a church wedding. It's been a lie we've been told over many generations. Um, Wedding is a family affair. Getting married is totally a family affair. Has nothing to do with the church. Christ never blessed a marriage. The disciples never blessed any marriages. You got married, yes, they advised you to get married, but there were proper channels in place for getting married, and the church never was one of them. The paganization and Romanization of the church brought in all sorts of syncretized beliefs and faiths, and then gave the church a power that it did not have and it was never intended to have. Because Christ speaks of a world where nobody's going to get married. And Christ walked with Mary and Martha, never gave them husbands. So I don't understand how this filtered into the church unchecked. But aside that, I will never stand for indiscriminate sex. So if you're one person who has many sexual partners, or you do not have a position in life with regards to your sexual life, you need to do something about it and do something very quick. The wrath of God is upon the sinner. God might love you, but he doesn't love your sin. Please try as much as possible to fix that part of your life going into 2020. If you want to get married, please do. If you want to be in a relationship where things are better defined, and of course, remember, in the free nation, you can get married tonight if you wanted to, because the scriptures tell us of how Adam and Eve became one before God. And if you were to use that formula, it was Adam, Eve, and God. There was no pastor, no father, no mother there at all. So, in essence, your marriage depends on the two of you and God. The next line of protocol is your family. I would never advise anyone to get married without their family's consent, because when you have issues, you come to the family and then the issues multiply. So please, unless you have one of those families that absolutely are out to destroy you, or you just absolutely do not get along for any reason, somebody's just waking up, please please, as much as possible, carry your family along and get their blessing. But when that isn't possible, it all depends on you at the end of the day. But please try as much as possible to stay away from sin. The fact that you've been saved by the blood does not entitle you to go on living in sin. All right. Talking about relationships, you've got to understand, and I'm going to give you my personal experience without any prejudice or bias against my ex. I'm going to try to give you some, I'm going to try to throw some light onto that. My ex was not the one for me. I didn't know. We were in the same school, we're in the same class, we were cool, but there got to a time when the revelation of my purpose became imminent, and she couldn't understand where I was going or what I was made about, what I was made of. And I remember her words, maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe she didn't mean it in a negative way. Maybe she just couldn't understand it, because it's not really easy to live with someone who is going to stand against what you have as wisdom, common wisdom. Somebody's going to come and tell you that, nope, what you think is God is not God, is actually the devil. This is God. You call him the devil, but he's actually God. And this, what you've been calling God all along, is the devil. That's like he's going to flip your life on its belly. It's going to do a 360 for you, and what was front now becomes back, and what was back now is where you're facing. I've got to be careful to understand that Even as I walk this walk, sometimes even I'm worried, because turning your faith, what you believed in, around 360 degrees is very, very dizzying. You're spinning at a very fast rate, and you tend to lose consciousness, you tend to lose control, and you tend to be very confused. Up until now, I've had debates about when does the decade end. Is it 2019, 2020, or 2021? And we've all come up with all sorts of little ideologies here and there. It started off as fun, but got very confusing for us all, before we finally settle down and say, you know what, the decade is 2010 to 2020. So we're starting a new decade now. But if you were with us throughout the argument, you would have come to the realization that it is quite difficult sometimes, when there's a lot of information, to get understanding. So I'm not blaming her for not getting understanding. I'm just coming to the realization that she wasn't the person to walk that walk with me. And although I do not believe in church marriage, we never had a church marriage. We only had traditional and the court system. And I used to believe those days that we still had to do the church wedding, even though we didn't. There were many lapses between us, but the greatest was she didn't see my purpose. She didn't understand the meaning for and of my life. And where I was going was definitely not where she was going. I'm not saying where she's going is bad, but it wasn't where I was going. And I used to remember her words for many years. I'm sure if you ask her, she probably will have things of equal magnitude to say about me, that I probably said without remembering. But you see, the one at the receiving end tends to remember more than the one at the giving end, which, in a situation where there are two people involved, you don't know when you're giving and you don't know when you're receiving, but you remember when what you're receiving, and the other party will also remember what they're receiving. They will not remember what they gave that hurt you, and you wouldn't remember what you gave. So I'm not saying this in any way to make her look bad. I'm just trying to draw something out of it, so we can be fine-tuned into the understanding of what a relationship can do for you or to you with regards to your purpose. She used to say to me for many years, I could put it at 5 or 10 years, that there's nothing in me, nothing to learn. And she used to say it, and I used to believe her. And it's happened for many years. And I remember one day we sat down. As of then, we'd separated. So my then pastor called us, and he was like, "So what's the problem?" You know how he talks. And he was talking, and in all fairness, he wasn't really making much sense to me. He was saying I should go back and fix the relationship, and I didn't see why. Because in John chapter 4, when the Samaritan woman at the well met Christ, Christ told her she'd had five husbands and she was living with her boyfriend. Christ never told her to leave her boyfriend and go back to her first husband or second husband or third husband. He never called her a sinner, never told her to stop living with her boyfriend. So I'm not understanding this. You have to go back to your. I'm not understanding it. You see, yes, there are lots of concessions that say a man cannot remarry, or a couple cannot remarry if the other person is alive, blah 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 blah, forgetting that Christ gave, he gave a command that says, if unless the woman is caught or the partner is caught in adultery, in Matthew 19:9, you could verify that for yourselves. Let me maybe just I could quickly get it for you before we go any further, so you'd understand exactly what I'm talking about. So when you're armed with this, if you have a relationship where he says, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality, for porneia, and marries another woman commits adultery. A lot of people lean on this and say you can only break up a marriage for sexual reasons. Yes, makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. It's right there. But also remember that Christ said, whoever looks at a woman lustfully already commits adultery. So the beauty about Christ is he didn't define something thoroughly in such a way that you could become a hypocrite. You could build hypocrisy out of his doctrines. He made it in such a way that even you who are married but looking at other people, you are already committing that adultery you're afraid of committing if you left the marriage. You've got to understand these precepts very clearly. And I wasn't understanding what the pastor was saying. And Paul also gave a concession. He says when somebody leaves you, a non-believer leaves you, you don't need to go back after them. Let them go. You are no longer bound to them. By you're no longer bound to them, meaning you don't need to wait for them to die. If you are no longer bound to somebody, why do you need to wait for that person to die? And why is this? He says, if a non-believer wants to stay, a non-believer who's not committing adultery wants to stay with you, there's every reason why you must stay with that person, because your belief purifies the family. There in the scriptures a concession from Paul. However, if a non-believer, whether he commits adultery or not, doesn't want to stay, wants to go, you're not bound to that person for life. Let me read that to you also from the scriptures. So you can have 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and 15. You should read the entire chapter for clarity. 1 Corinthians 7 and 15 says, but if the husband or wife who isn't a believer insists on leaving, let them go. In such cases, the believing husband or wife is no longer bound to the other, for God has called you to live in peace. He is no longer bound. They are no longer bound to the other. So the death must do us part thing was removed by Paul in this concession, and the death do us part thing was removed by Christ in the Matthew 19:9 concession. Command. Christ doesn't have concessions. He has commands. The disciples have concessions. I taught a bit of that in 2019, and we're going to expand on our teaching of Petarian and Pauline concessions that have become church traditions. So, what am I trying to say in essence? The pastor was speaking with his human authority, but didn't have God-given authority because he didn't understand the word of God. And while we're still deliberating, is this yes, is this no? We remember the woman in John chapter 4. She had had 5 husbands. Christ never at any point or juncture made her a sinner or feel bad for having several relationships. Instead, he saw her purpose, and I'm feeling like if she hadn't been through all those many marriages and ended up where she was, she might not have been the right vessel for Christ to use. He met her at her then and there as a complete package of her entire life, and he saw her and used her as a vessel, and he gave her the words of life, the bubbling spring of life he planted in her. And here's the funny thing, his own disciples, those who were supposed to follow him, when they came, they didn't understand what he was doing with her. They didn't understand what she was doing. They were more worried about their carnal feeding. And Two chapters later, in John chapter 6, when Christ gave them the same message, they didn't understand it and they all abandoned him. You can read John chapter 6 from about 50 all the way down. It explains everything with clarity. And then I realized that this man who's supposed to be leading me doesn't know where he's going. He's worried about the carnality. If he was with Christ, he would have worried more about the food that Christ didn't eat than about the message Christ was spreading to the Samaritan town. So I pulled out. It was very difficult to pull out of a church. But the more I pulled out, the more I started receiving the revelations directly. And I must tell you this, the first gift Christ gives the resurrected body is opening the mind to understand the Spirit. Sometimes the Spirit comes first, but if you do not understand the Spirit, you will not have a good ground to receive the Spirit. The nourishment of both the body and the Spirit, guess what? Is the Word of God. John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became manifest and lived amongst us as flesh. And that is exactly what Christ spoke to the woman at the Samaritan well. She understood. That's exactly what Christ spoke to his disciples in John 6. They didn't understand. They were like, we're not going to eat your flesh and we're not going to drink your blood. What are you talking about, dude? I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense whatsoever to you at all. So the great decision you're going to make moving into 2020 is your relationship, your marriage. If you made a career mistake, and the biggest career mistake you can ever make is marrying the wrong person or tying yourself to a relationship with the wrong person. You will commit adultery with ease. You will look the look at adultery and the physical adultery you would commit all with ease. You need to be very careful. If you have, Christ said, whoever is not ready to leave family for me is not worthy of me. So if Christ calls you and there are people who are not willing to go with you on that call, you've got to make a choice. Am I going to follow Christ or am I going to follow the world? There's nothing wrong in Peter came along with a believing wife, the scriptures tell us, but Paul didn't have a believing wife. Why? Paul felt he was better off by himself. It came with a big cross and it's going to come with a big cross. Some of you are better off alone. Let me tell you the first thing. When my ex left in 2014, I was alone for a few weeks. And after being alone for a few weeks, it was difficult for me to even enter any serious relationship. It was very difficult because I found peace by myself. And until you can find peace for yourself, by yourself, you cannot find peace in anyone. You've got to find it in you. You've got to find it for you. So 2020 should be a defining year with regards to your career choices, and your begin with your relationships. You've got to be very careful who you get into relationships with. You've got to be, I was very lucky, but you see, I wouldn't just say lucky. I would say I was blessed because the spirit works with the flesh and receives its nourishment from the creator. So God understands your spirit, understands your flesh, and guides you into that realm. So your fleshy choices would reflect in your spirit, and your spiritual choices will reflect in your flesh. I don't know who it is that I'm speaking to. So, two things I have for you for 2019. One, fix yourself. Two, fix your relationships. Very important. Without those two things, forget going to church, forget praying, forget listening to motivational speakers, forget doing anything. You're going nowhere until you can fix yourself and your relationships. Relationships need not only be relationships like marriage or boyfriend, girlfriend, or anything amorous. Your friends, who are the circle of friends that are around you? Are they ride or die, or at the touch of a button, are they going to switch off on you like an electricity switch? Think about these things deep, deep and hard. Somebody has something to say. I'm just going to read this. You said you don't believe in the church marriage, but got married to your ex while making her your ex. Was that not against your belief? Did you believe and your belief encourage divorce as a Christian, or are you saying I'm 100% pro divorce? And I say this without what I have seen. What I have seen. Let me tell you, if you're in a bad marriage, you cannot fulfill your purpose. I wish I could sugarcoat it for you guys. Many people are managing their marriages and thinking that with a managed marriage you can fulfill your purpose. You will not. You will roam around the wilderness for many more years than you were destined to be there. I'll tell it to you. However, the scriptures do not allow you to leave unless there's adultery or you do not believe in the same. My ex was not a believer. I'm sorry, my ex she doesn't know who Yeshua is. She didn't know who he was. She knew Jesus, the 400-year-old invention. She knew the whole God of the world worship. That's not belief. That's not what I believe in. So that alone is opportunity, and many other opportunities that are all scriptural for that to be fulfilled. A lot of people would tell you that a good marriage is endured, not enjoyed. Those people are wicked. While you are enduring that marriage, your mates are enjoying their lonely singleness or good, healthy, wholesome relationships. There's nothing in a marriage that's going to take you to heaven. There's nothing in a marriage that's going to make you wealthier. There's nothing in a marriage that's going to make you more peace of mind. So I don't see what you are enduring for. What? And let me tell you, children can see when their parents are enduring and it doesn't endear marriage to them. Most children whose parents have had rough marriages don't want to marry. Most of the people, even, let me not even say anything, but just keep that at the back of your mind. Old people who were raised on old and wholesome doctrines will tell you you must die inside your marriage. But if you die inside marriage, now hellfire that they won't give you. My two messages for you for 2020. Leave all these gist that you are just and hear me. There are people who died in marriages in 2019. If you die in a marriage in 2020, after you've heard my voice, your blood is on your own hands. Here is what I am telling you. Fix yourself and fix your relationships. That is everything I have to say to you. Until you're ready to fix yourself and fix your relationships. Forget any career choices, forget anything. You're just going to be stumbling around and winking in the dark and stumbling in the dark and hitting all sorts of things with your shin. When you fix yourself and you fix your relationships, you give yourself light. God bless you.